Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's live Facebook event. We're going to be discussing everything absentee voting tonight. So thank you for joining us. We hope this evening will be informative, helpful, and will provide you with lots of answers to all your questions about absentee voting from India. My name is Laura, and I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Sarah. We're your voting assistance officers for the evening, and we're coming to you live from the US Consulate General in Chennai. However, I know we have folks joining us from all over India, so welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Over the course of this event, we'll be taking all of your questions about absentee voting, so please put them into the comment section on the Facebook Live event at any point. We'll do our best to answer all of them, and if we can't get to a question or we can't provide you an answer tonight, we'll do our best to get back to you directly at a later time. Of course, you're also welcome to reach out to us at any point. We will be putting up contact information for the US Embassy and all of the consulates at the end of our event, but you're welcome to email, reach out at any point if you have additional questions that we didn't go over tonight. So we also understand that you or others may have additional questions about services that the US Embassy and consulates provide in India. For the sake of tonight's event, we're going to be limiting our discussion purely to absentee voting procedures. So we just ask that you limit your questions to that topic as well. Okay, so with that, just a few notes that I'd like to point out before we get started. The main website that you're going to want to use to access everything absentee voting is fvap.gov. That's a website we're going to be referencing many times throughout the evening. So make sure you're familiar with that site. It's an excellent resource and has all of the information you could ever want about absentee voting. And of course, don't forget, this year's general election is November 3rd. Okay, so to start off our evening, we have a very short 5-minute informative video about the absentee voting process. So we'll go ahead and play that video. Hopefully it will give you a good background and many of the procedures you'll need to go through the absentee voting process from start to finish, okay? This video is also available on our YouTube page, so you can access it at a later time if you need to reference it. And with that, we'll start the video.
Hi there, my name is Laura, and I'm a consular officer here at the US Consulate in Chennai. The right of US citizens to vote is a fundamental right afforded protection by the US Constitution. And we're here to ensure that every eligible voter knows how to request an absentee ballot and vote from abroad. So let's go through the steps right now so you know how to register to vote and request an absentee ballot. First, go to fvap.gov. This is the official website for the Federal Voting Assistance Program. Navigate up to Overseas Citizen Voters and click on How to Vote Absentee. Here you'll see the 2 easy steps that are required to register to vote and request an absentee ballot, and then instructions on how to actually fill out your ballot and send it once it arrives. But we're going to register and request our absentee ballot today. You can do that by completing the federal postcard application, available here. So make sure that you read through all of the fine print and click I accept to continue. Now, you can choose your state of voting residence by using your last legal residence in the United States. For the purposes of this example, let's just say that the last place I lived in the United States was Newark, New Jersey. So let's click on New Jersey. And Newark, of course, is in Essex County, so scroll down to select the correct county. For the absentee ballot classification, make sure that you read through all of the options and choose the one that is most appropriate to your circumstances. So for this example, let's just say that I'm a US citizen living outside the country and my intent to return to the US is uncertain. Make sure that you correctly fill out all of your personal information here. For your voting residence, that would be your last legal residence in the United States. Enter your mailing address here, and for us, this would be our mailing address here in India. Make sure that you read the instructions here to see if entering a forward address is appropriate to your situation. Here, you can select how you would like to receive your ballot, either by email or online, through mail or by fax. But whatever you choose, make sure that you fill out your contact information here at the bottom so that your local election official can contact you if necessary. Here you can designate the period for which you want to receive ballots. And then review all of the information that you input into FVAP to make sure that it's correct. If you need to make a correction, you can do that by clicking the edit button in the lower right-hand corner before you continue. Then all you have to do is click to download your FPCA package and sign it. Then make sure that you put it into an envelope. And here you can see in the middle of the page that you can download an envelope with postage paid. Now, if you're not sure where to send your voting materials, what you can do is you can navigate up here to Voting Assistance Officer and scroll down to Voting Assistance Guide. Here again, you'll select the state appropriate to you, so we'll select New Jersey. And here you'll see a bunch of important information. For example, here you'll see the federal election deadlines for New Jersey. And if you scroll down, you'll see the contact information for each local election office. So if we want to see Essex County's information, here it is. Their address, their fax, and their email. So once you're done filling out all of the information, make sure that you download and print the federal postcard application. Before you seal it in an envelope, be sure that you sign it here at the bottom and date it with today's date. You can also download the postage paid on a sheet of paper and print it out. Then put your voting materials in the envelope and seal it. Now you can either drop this off with us here at the Consulate, or you can put it in a separate envelope and send it to us here. If you do decide to send your voting materials to the U.S. Consulate, make sure that it's signed and sealed in a postage-paid envelope. Or if you decide to put it in your own envelope, make sure that it has sufficient domestic postage so that it can reach your voting official in the U.S. If you have any questions at all, you can contact us at chennaics@state.gov. We'll be holding a Facebook Live event to answer any and all questions you may have on August 17th, so be sure to join us on social media.
Okay. I hope you all found that as helpful as I did. I know that it answered a lot of the questions that I first had when I was mailing in my registration and voting materials. So that's a great reference. Like I said, again, you can access that on our YouTube page at any point. Okay, so I do see that we've had a lot of questions start to come in this evening. That's great. Please keep them coming. When you put in your question, let us know where you're writing from. We'd love to see where in India people are going to be voting from. And especially because this is coming from all over India, it's great to know where everyone is. All right, so to get us started, I just wanted to go over one of the most popular questions we get about voting, which is something that they went over in the end of the video, which is how can I get my voting materials, my ballot, to the consulate or the US Embassy and have the consulate or embassy send it to the United States on my behalf. Okay, so we're just going to go over that. I have a few props here I'm going to use. Keep the questions coming, and we'll start with this. Okay, so just like in the video, the first thing to do is to fill out all of your registration materials. That's the first step, and later on, it's the same process for your absentee ballots when you get to sending in your ballot. Okay, so say you are sending in your voter registration request right now, which is also called the federal postcard application, right? It's this. I hope you can see that. It doesn't really matter. These are all the documents that you'll be printing out from the fvap.gov website to send in your absentee voter registration, okay? So just like in the video, go ahead and print out your materials, fill them in, and please read all of the instructions very carefully. You don't want to miss something. Make sure you sign it, date it, all of the important things. All right, so once you have that filled out completely, take it and fold it up so that it fits inside an envelope, okay? You can take any envelope that you have in your house, just a plain white envelope, just like this, works just fine, okay? And the great thing is that on the fvap.gov website, you can download a template for sending the envelope to your voting officials in the United States. It prints out just like this. Right, so it's a template to mail in your voting registration materials to your officials. You would need to fill out your return address and the mailing address of your local voting officials in the states. If you don't know that address, it's very easy to find on the fvap.gov website. Just go to fvap.gov/guide, and I'll ask my colleagues to put that in the comments. It's fvap.gov/guide. And just like they did on the video, choose your state from the map. And then when you scroll down, you should see all of the addresses for all of the voting officials in your state and your counties. Okay, so you can take this template for your envelope and tape it, glue it, stick it right on that blank white envelope that you have, okay? So once you do that, it should look something like this, okay? Put your voting registration materials or your absentee ballot in this envelope. All right, now, a couple ways of getting this to us here at the consulates. There are 3 consulates that have drop boxes. I believe that's Hyderabad, Chennai, and Mumbai. They have those drop boxes right in front of the building. So you can simply take this and put it in the drop box in person, very easy. Now, if you don't live near one of those consulates, you can also mail it to the US Embassy or consulates. So those mailing addresses can be found on our website. Now, if you're going to do that, if you're going to mail it into one of the consulates, this is very, very important. Please take this envelope and put it inside another envelope, right? So we have 2 envelopes now. Put the white envelope inside whatever secondary envelope you have. And on the secondary envelope, put your name, the address of the consulate or embassy, and local domestic postage to mail it to the consulate within India. Once we get that package, we'll take care of the rest. We'll send it on to the United States, and hopefully it will get to your voting officials as quickly and safely as possible. So that's the general process. Hopefully that makes sense. And so we'll go next to my colleague Sarah to see what questions we have coming in from the Facebook chat.
So we have some great questions coming in. The first I see is, can we vote early? And I think to answer that, the short question is yes. I want to go over the timeline just to make sure everyone understands what you need to do and when. So it's a 2-step process to be able to vote as an American citizen from overseas. Your first step is going to be to register and request your absentee ballot. So this is a step that people should, if you haven't taken it already, this is something you should be thinking about doing in the relative near term. There are deadlines to register to vote. So for that process, you'll go through the steps as were outlined in the video, finding your state, and you can, to send that in, you can either do it by mail, and I believe, I will be corrected if this is incorrect, but I believe in most cases, in most states, you can send that in by email as well. So once you've registered to vote and requested your absentee ballot, you should be sent your absentee ballot. And we are accepting absentee ballots starting now. So if you've already received your absentee ballot, you are welcome to go ahead and drop that off or mail it in. If you have not received your absentee ballot 30 days before the election, so that's October 4th, then you should fill out a federal backup ballot. There's a link on the FVPA's website. If you scroll down, you can see request a backup ballot. My colleague will post in the comments the exact link to that. And so if you haven't received your ballot, if you're worried you're not going to get it in time, you can go ahead and fill out that backup ballot, send that in as well. And then if your regular ballot does not get there in time, the backup ballot will be counted. If you're worried about timing and you want to send that in case, you want to send both your regular ballot and the backup ballot in, that's fine. Only one of your ballots is going to be counted. So to answer your question, yes, you can vote early. If you've already received your ballot, please do go ahead and drop that off with us. We have a couple of questions about if people can drop off their ballot in Hyderabad or at the consulate. So as my colleague Laura said, again, there's 3 consulates where indeed you can drop it off. So that's Hyderabad, Chennai, and Mumbai. If you go to our websites, you'll find directions for exactly where those boxes are located. The one thing to keep in mind is please do make sure to put your ballot into this envelope addressed to the right voting authorities. So please don't just drop in your ballot, like fold it up, make sure it's in the correct envelope, and make sure it has the correct address on it. That's because in the United States, elections are run by each electoral district. We want to make sure that your ballot is going to the correct location. And with that, I will turn that over to my colleague Laura for our next question.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. So I see that we have a question here coming in. How can one vote if they are a US citizen but have never lived in the US and don't have an official address there? That's a really, really great question. It's a question we get a lot. So again, each state has different regulations and rules slightly about the voting process. So always the best thing to do is to make sure that you know the rules and regulations for your state. Again, like I mentioned before, you can find all of those details on fvap.gov/guide and then look for your state. If you have any specific questions, you can always reach out to your voting officials that are listed on that page. I know when I was filling out mine, I had a question, I reached out to them. I got an answer the next day. It was super easy. So they are a great resource about your specific state. Now, if you have never lived in the United States before, there are 38 states plus the District of Columbia that will allow you to vote if you are a US citizen but have never actually lived in the United States. So if you want to find that out, go online to the fvap.gov website to see if your state allows that. And so for you, if you've never lived in the United States, your state would most likely be the last legal residence of your parents in the United States. Okay, so if your parents were living there, even if it was a very long time ago, they don't have to own that property. The property doesn't necessarily, need to be one that they have any connection to still, but that would be the family's last legal residence in the United States. And if you are voting in one of those states that allows individuals to vote who have never lived in that state, you could use that address as the one to register for voting. Now, if you did live in the United States, but it's just been a really long time, essentially the same rule applies, right? You're going to want to look for the last legal residence in the United States and use that for voting purposes, okay? If you're unsure what that address was, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to find what that last residence might be. Talk to your parents, look through old receipts, property bills, utility bills, school registrations. There's any number of records that you might be able to use to find what that last legal residence in the United States would be. So once you figure that out, that would be the state and the county in which you would submit your voting materials. Okay, I hope that answered the question. We've got many coming in, so over to you, Sarah.
Okay, great. So our next question is, one of our American citizens has already requested an absentee ballot, has already voted absentee in the primary elections, and they're asking if they need to register to vote or request a ballot again. And no, you only need to do that once a year. So if in this year you've already registered to vote and already requested your absentee ballot, you do not need to do that again. You should be sent your ballot for voting in the general election, however you signed up to receive your ballots. Again, if it's 30 days and you haven't received your ballot, you're welcome to use the backup ballot and send that in as well, but you don't need to register again. Now over to Laura. That was a short question.
All right, so it looks like we have a lot of questions coming in, which I think Sarah just answered about when to register, when to go into the system and update your information. Like she said, just make sure that everything is correct and updated periodically. I do see a question saying, how do you contact the election officials for your state? I've been trying to get in touch with my state and they haven't been responding. Sorry that you haven't gotten a response. It is a busy time. Maybe you just need to try again. Again, the best place to do that, like I said, is fvap.gov/guide. Click on the state. There's a map of the United States. Click on your state, scroll down, and all of the information should be in there. That's a great resource for your state. See if you can get the information for the contact from there. If that is the contact information you've been using and you haven't gotten an answer, just try again. You know, there's a lot of folks reaching out right now, so it may just be a backup, but that's going to be the best resource, and it should have all of the contact information for each district within your state. Okay, Sarah, back to you.
Okay, great. So we have a question. Can they send their voter registration to the Chennai Consulate instead of to the United States? So yes, but our role in this is not to take the voter registration and register you. The consulate's role is to get your mail to the United States. So as Laura demonstrated, you can fill out your voter registration. You need to put it in this envelope, put the correct address on it. Again, you can find that either at the end of the guide or at fvap.gov/guide. So put the correct address on there, put your address on there, and then you will need to put it into another envelope and address this envelope to the U.S. Consulate General in Chennai. We'll post all of the mailing addresses, but so you can send your voter registration to the U.S. Consulate General Chennai or any of the U.S. consulates in India, but it needs to have your voter registration within the envelope, which will, once it gets to the United States, be routed to your correct voting jurisdiction. So again, our function in this is to get the mail and send it to the United States. So it needs to be correctly addressed. And this envelope is postage paid within the United States, so you don't need to worry about putting any stamps on it. Okay, over to Laura.
I feel like we're playing ping pong here, Sarah, with questions. This is great. Please keep your questions coming. We're really enjoying seeing them. Again, you can always post them in the Facebook comment, and we're going to do our best to get to everything. We see that there are still a lot coming in, which is great. Keep them coming. Okay, so just a follow-up to the last point I made about reaching out to your election officials. If you are not able to get answers, or if you're having trouble, if you need someone to just talk through what's going on, I just wanted to mention also that the U.S. Embassy and the consulates in India are a great resource for questions that you might have. We might not have the answers ourselves. We may direct you to the website, but we can certainly help you with that process. We're happy to talk through it. Each consulate and embassy in the world has a dedicated American Citizen Services unit. It's one of the primary sections and goals of the United States is to support American citizens living abroad. So please do avail yourself of that resource at any point for voting or other purposes. Again, we will be posting contact information at the very end of this program. But for Chennai, you're welcome to reach out to chennaics@state.gov. All of the other consulates and the embassy in India have email addresses and phone numbers as well. So reach out to them as a great resource, okay? And then another follow-up question on my previous point, somebody asked, so if you don't have a connection to that last address in the United States, can you still use it as your address, even if it's owned by somebody else? And the answer is, in general, yes, you can. You don't have to own that residence. You don't have to have any connection, but that was your last legal residence or your family's last legal residence, depending on the situation. So even if there is no current connection, that could still be how you find the basis for your state of voting, okay? Now, obviously you want to make sure when you're filling out your materials that you put your current contact information. That's very important, right? So the voting officials need a way to be able to reach you if they have any questions, right? How are they going to send you your materials? Are you receiving them by mail or email? Make sure you put current contact information so that they can reach out to you with any questions. But that old residence can form the basis for finding your legal voting residence within the United States. Okay, next question.
Okay, Okay, we have a question. If we can register in one state and vote in a different state, the answer to that is no. You need to register in the state that you last lived in, or as Laura mentioned, potentially your parents last lived in, if that is allowed in that state, and then you will go ahead and vote in that state. So you can't choose which state to register in. It needs to be the state where you had your last, where you last lived. And I'll just answer another question because it's related in this. So even if you don't have any connection to, even if you currently don't have any connection to your last address, if the house has been sold, if it's been destroyed, if it was your parents' house and you only lived there when you were 3, that's still fine. That's still your last address in the United States, and you'll register using that address. But it will be your last address in the United States. You can't pick and choose which state to register in. I hope that answers those questions. Now over to Laura for our next question.
Okay, so we have a question here about the white envelope that we both have held up at various points in this evening, right? So we have our handy props here. We were just showing a white envelope in which you can put your voting materials to send it to the consulates, okay? So the actual envelope needs to come from you, right? It can be any envelope. It doesn't have to be fancy or any particular type of envelope. You could probably even make one if you're very crafty out of a piece of paper, no big deal. However, if you're talking about the templates to put on the envelope, right? And that is this template here. Okay, this is the postage paid template. You can download this from fvap.gov, print it out on your computer. My envelope was a little bit smaller than this page, for example. So I just cut out the templates to the size of my envelope and glued it directly onto the front of my envelope. And if you're unsure about where to find that envelope template on the fvap.gov website, I found it easiest just by going to fvap.gov and then searching in the search box for envelope. It should come up with a template for the postage paid envelope. Print that out, fill out the information on it, tape it or glue it to whatever blank envelope you find around your house or you choose to make, and that will be good to get it to us. Okay, and then talking about that, somebody asked, can we use a courier service to send the ballot to the consulate, or does it have to be by the Indian Postal Service? You may indeed use a courier service, not a problem, okay? So however you need to get it to us, again, you have those multiple options. You have the drop box in Chennai, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. You can also send it by whatever means you need to, by courier or postal service, okay? All right, next question.
Okay, so the question, can we directly submit the completed FPCA by email to the last residential address county election official? So for your registration and for requesting ballots, I believe for every state the answer is yes. And to be clear, that's by email, so you'll still need to print it out, sign it, scan it in, email it in. But I believe by for every state you can email it in. Now, when it comes to actually submitting your ballot, the answer is going to depend by state. For some states, you can submit your ballot by email, but for some states, you do have to mail it in. So do check on your state, see if they will accept ballots by email, but for the actual registration, you should be able to email it in. Let's see. Now I'll turn over to Laura for our next question.
Okay, you guys are so fast on these questions. We're trying to keep up here. This is great. Okay, I'll answer two because they're kind of short. So the first one is, when we were in the United States, we lived in a rented apartment. Does that qualify as our last residence for the purpose of determining a voting state in the United States? And yes, that's totally fine. A rented address is an address at which you were living in the United States. You can definitely use that as the address to determine where your legal residency for voting would be, okay? And then the other part of that is, how can we make sure that we are registered to vote? So the best way to do that is to reach out to your local voting officials for wherever you are registering, okay? Again, I'm gonna repeat the same thing, fvap.gov/guide. Find your state and voting county there. And then once you've found that, it has contact information, just reach out to them, say, you know, I'm checking on the status of this. They should be able to provide you that information. Okay, so that's the best way. And again, a lot of questions you have about voting in that particular county or district, you're welcome to reach out to your voting officials, and hopefully they'll get back to you as soon as possible with the answers to those questions.
Okay, and our next question is, what is the earliest date we can mail in the ballot to the Chennai Consulate? The answer is as soon as you want to. We are currently accepting ballots. As soon as you get your ballot, you are welcome to send it to us and we will route it to the United States. We already have the boxes hanging outside of our consulates where you can drop it off. So there's no time when you have to wait to send your ballot in. If you've received it, if you're ready to vote, you're welcome to send that off to us now. Let's see. And then we have a question. I registered at my local county. Would it hurt to register on FVPA again? I guess it depends on what you mean by local county. So if you've registered to vote in the United States, you used to live in the United States, you used to go to a polling station and vote, so you are registered to vote, you still will need to request your absentee ballot again, because otherwise they don't know that they need to send it to you. So you still will need to fill out the FPCA again. If you filled out the FPCA in the past year, they already know that you're living abroad and they need to send it to you a different way. Then you don't need to do it. But if you've just sort of registered as a citizen living in the United States, or if it's been more than a year since you've registered to vote from abroad, then you do need to do that again. Then I will send that over. Next question over to Laura.
Okay, so a question here that says, if a state does not allow online ballot submission via email, could we mail the ballot to the US Consulate in our city? So yeah, we've covered this a couple times. That's a really great question. You can indeed. So some states do not allow ballots to be sent by email. So again, you always have the option of going through the consulate in your city or the US Embassy in Delhi. We'll provide the mailing addresses at the end of this on the final slide of the evening. Some you can do a drop box in person in Chennai, Hyderabad, or Mumbai. And all the other consulates and the embassy, you can certainly mail your materials directly to us, and we'll facilitate getting them safely into the United States if your state does not allow online submission. Okay, so that's great. And we have a question here. I'm registered, but I have not received my absentee ballot yet. How do I proceed? Totally fine. Do not panic if you have not received your absentee ballot yet. So each state does it a little bit differently. Some states, if you are doing online ballots, you may get it a little bit earlier. Some states you may get it a little bit later. Like we mentioned earlier, each state has to send out the absentee ballots 45 days in advance of the general election. Now, we're in India, it's a little bit far, so there may be some delay in getting your materials to you here in India. But that 45 days is when states need to have sent out their absentee ballot materials. If you are getting your materials by email, you should get it pretty close to that 45-day mark. However, really until 30 days, don't worry too much about it. If you haven't received it, there may be that delay. At 30 days, again, if you have not received your absentee ballot, go ahead and fill out a backup ballot, send that in just in case. If later at some point your absentee ballot does arrive, go ahead and fill that out as well. The backup ballot and the absentee ballot, your vote will only be counted once. The states generally prefer to use that absentee ballot, so they'll use that first. But if your absentee ballot doesn't arrive, or by 30 days you haven't received it, just go on to fvap.gov, get the backup ballot, and send that in to vote. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, so we're getting our question, as a first-time voter, how do they register to vote? Great question. We're excited this is your first time voting. So the answer to the question is just like everyone else. So the FPCA, you're both registering to vote and requesting your ballot. So you'll go ahead, put in the last address you lived in the United States, even if when you were living at the address, you never voted for whatever reason, including because you're under 18. So you use the last address, you'll fill out the FPCA, you'll send it in, and then you'll receive your ballot and vote just like anyone else would. Let's see, and then we're having a question about documents. Do they need to send any copies of documents along with the ballot? So just follow the instructions for each state. We don't believe that, I don't think many states require you to send in any copies of any documents, but follow the directions that are listed by your state, because they're different for each state, and make sure that you're covering all the steps needed. Let's see. Then we have a question. My sister still lives in the US in California, and I have a driver's license from California. Can I register to vote there, and can my children vote there as well? So it depends on where you last lived in the United States. So you'll need to register to vote on where you last lived in the United States. If your children are American citizens, and if they lived in the United States previously, they'll also register to vote in the last place where they lived. So if that's California, but if that's a different state where you last lived, they'll also register to vote in that state. If your children have never lived in the United States before, it will depend on the state. Again, I think 38 states and the District of Columbia will allow American citizens who've never lived in the United States to register to vote in their states if their parents live there or is their parents' last residence, but you'll need to check state by state with that. Now over to Laura.
Okay, so our next question says, after we've registered online, and if the state does allow an online ballot, would we receive a physical ballot that we scan and send, or would we receive an online ballot which we send over email directly? Great question. Again, each state does this slightly differently. I'm very sad the state in which I vote does not do this. We don't, I can't do online voting. I'm very sad about that. So I don't have any personal experience with that one, but just follow all of the instructions you receive from your voting officials. They may tell you to print and scan something. It may be something that you can email directly, and then you may not be able to, depending on your specific circumstances. However, your state, your district, your voting officials should provide all of those details very clearly to you. And I would just say, like, in all of this process, it's really important to read all of the details, right? You don't want your ballot to be disqualified because you didn't sign the back of the envelope or you didn't fill out the information correctly. They are very, very good about providing all of the steps you need to do, all of the information right in the materials. So just follow all of their directions very clearly, and they should be able to tell you if you need to scan it, print it, email it directly, and that again is state by state, okay? And someone asks, even with that backup ballot, how can we be sure that our votes will be received in time? So I think my colleague Sarah said this earlier, we recommend that you vote as early as possible in the process, right? So at that 30-day mark, if you haven't received your ballot, go ahead and try to submit the backup ballot. You don't need to wait until you get closer and closer to the election. Try to vote as soon as you are able to do so, given your current circumstances and the voting situation in which you find yourself. Again, you can always reach out to your voting officials in your county to ask them if the information has been received. They are a great resource, but always the best, since we are living abroad, is to try to turn in your materials at the earliest possible time for your current situation. Okay, Sarah, back to you.
Okay, so we have a question, another first-time voter who wants to know the process. So again, the process is just the same as if you hadn't you had voted before. So if you go to fvap.gov, it will walk you through the entire process. The video that we posted are the steps that you'll take. So you'll click request an absentee ballot, you'll click the state of your last residence, and then it'll walk you through the steps you need to register to vote and to receive your absentee ballot. So once you send that in, again, that's probably going to be either by mail or by email. So it's not an online form. You'll fill things out online, and it will give you a nice form that you will fill out, you will sign. You'll either scan it in, send it by email, or you'll send it by mail. Once you've sent in your registration and your request for the absentee ballot, you'll receive your absentee ballot either by whatever means that you signed up to do it. So first-time voters are just the same as any other voter for registering. And so again, go to fvap.gov. If you have any questions about the process, you can watch our video that's on our Facebook page and our YouTube page, and I'll walk you through a little bit more step by step. Let's see. So we also have a question about the postage to the when dropping the absentee ballot in the drop box. So one of the nice things is if you print out this envelope, here it is. This is actually no postage paid within the United States. So if you're dropping it off into the drop box, you don't need to worry about postage. You don't need to worry about finding US stamps. You can just put it into the envelope and drop it in the drop box. No need to worry about postage. The only postage you need to worry about is if you are sending it to the consulate within India. So then you'll need postage to get it to the consulate. But there's no postage needed within the United States. Let's see. Another couple questions. My son will turn 18 on November 25th. Is he eligible to vote in this election? Unfortunately, I believe for the federal election, and I believe in all state elections, you need to be 18 by the day of the election. So unfortunately, your son has just missed it this year. And then we have a question, does Connecticut let you send in your FPCA online? Neither of us live in Connecticut, and each state has different requirements. So we'd suggest that you go to fvap.gov/guide, and you can check all the different requirements for Connecticut. But we can't answer questions on particular state requirements because there's 50 of them. We don't know all of them. And then I'll go over to Laura.
Okay, great. All right, so we have a couple questions that came in from one individual, starting with, how do we vote if we are a US citizen but do not have a US address? Okay, great question. It's one we get a lot. As we mentioned before, you do need to determine what your last legal residence in the United States would be to determine which state you would be eligible to vote in. If you do not currently have a US address, that's okay. Right, so you can use the last legal residence that you maintained in the United States. Again, if you have never lived in the United States, there are 38 states plus the District of Columbia that will allow you to use your parents' last legal address in the United States for purposes of determining where you can vote in the election. So if you need to do a little bit of research on that to find out where your last legal residence was, or your parents' last legal residence, go ahead and do that by looking through old records to see if you can come up with an address. And that would be the address that you would use for purposes of determining which state you are eligible to vote in this election. Okay, and then following on that, it says on the form, it asks us to fill out the Social Security number. Do we need to submit Social Security details? So like a lot of things we're saying tonight, that really depends on the state. So each state has slightly different requirements when it comes to Social Security numbers. For some states, you do not need to provide a Social Security number for registration purposes. You can do so simply with name, legal residence, and date of birth. There are other states that require you to put in the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. And there are some states that require a full Social Security number for purposes of registering to vote. So again, go to fvap.gov/guide, find your state there. You should be able to find the requirements about Social Security numbers. And if you have specific questions about your Social Security number, if you can't remember it, if you don't have one, you can check on the specific state ballot, and you can also reach out to your election officials to discuss that situation if you should come across it. Okay, and Sarah, back to you.
Okay, so we have a question. We have an American citizen who lived in the United States before and now is going to be moving back there to school, but hasn't yet. Wants to know if they can register in the state they're going to move into. Unfortunately, no, it needs to be your last legal residence, not the state that you're planning to move to. I understand that that probably means you'll change it later, but it does need to be your last legal residence. We also have a question that I'm excited about. My daughter turns 18 in October. Will she be eligible to vote? As a fellow person who has a birthday in October, yes, she is eligible to vote. And then we have questions about how to send in the actual ballot, not the absentee ballot request form. So once you get the ballot, you will also send it in a similar envelope. You'll have to have my example somewhere. So just like the envelope you showed you can also use that to send it in. You can print it off or just write in the details. Again, no postage necessary. You will have to provide your own actual envelope, but the postage will be paid. You can either figure out how to get the printer to print onto the envelope, or you can print it onto a sheet of paper and paste it on there. But the process is exactly the same as it is to mail in your request form. Again, so that's either putting it in the envelope, physically dropping it off at the consulate, putting it in the envelope, putting it in another envelope, addressing this envelope to a U.S. consulate or embassy, or you're welcome to send it by courier service straight to the United States, but you will need to pay for that. Let's see, over to Laura for the next question.
Okay, I see a question here saying, how long is each FPCA valid for? Do I have to re-register for each election? So we generally recommend that you send your FPCA in every January. Also, anytime you would change your address or need to update your information, just to make sure that everything is current in the system. So that's our general recommendation, every January, or when you need to change the information about your address or contact information. Okay, and on top of that, can I mail my absentee ballot request to all of the consulates? Can I even mail my absentee ballot request form to a consulate that does not have a drop box? Excellent questions. So yes, you can mail it to any of us. We're not going to turn your ballot or your registration materials away because they came from somewhere else in India. You may want to mail it to the closest one to you just because that's the quickest, but certainly we're all happy to accept registration and absentee ballot materials from anyone in India. So feel free to send those along. And yes, you absolutely can mail your documents to a consulate that does not have a drop box. So the drop boxes, again, are located at the consulates, US consulates in Chennai, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. So for those 3 consulates, you can drop your materials off in person at the drop box at the front of the building. For all of the other consulates and those 3 consulates included, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Mumbai, you can mail your documents. And that's the same process, whether you're mailing in your registration form or your actual absentee ballot, okay? And at the very end, we're gonna put up a slide again with all of the addresses so that you can mail in your documents if you'd like to do that. You can also find those addresses on our website at any time. Okay, all right. I think we're catching up here on the questions. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I have a question. When will I receive the ballot paper if I send in the registration form to Chennai this week? That's a great question, and the answer is it depends. You know, it does physically have to get from India to the United States and then back from the United States to India. So probably not for a few weeks. We are getting into a slightly tight period. So if for sending in your registration, so if you if you send in your registration this week and you have not received a ballot by October 4th, you can go ahead and send in your absentee ballot and make sure that even if the ballot doesn't get here in time, your backup ballot, you can send in the backup ballot. And make sure that that does get counted. But unfortunately, we don't have any estimates because it depends on the states. So then we have a question, my state, Michigan, allows a designated family member to drop my ballot off at the local election authority. Is it legal to email them my completed and signed ballot to print out and send? So that is a great question for your election official. Each state has different requirements for that, and we can't give you any advice about whether that's legal or not. So we suggest that you go to fvap.gov /guide, find whoever your the contact information is for your election official, and then you can contact them about that question because they'll probably be better placed to answer it. Is there a drop box at the embassy in Delhi? No, there is not. So you can mail it to New Delhi, but there isn't a physical drop box where you can go and drop it off. How long does it take the ballot to get to the US from the consulate? We're telling people to budget about 4 weeks to make sure it gets there in time. And you can check, each state has a date by which they must receive the ballot. So there's no definitive date when you have to drop it off by, but you can sort of estimate the time periods by that 4 weeks, and then by the date that your state has to receive it by. let's see. And then another question, what do I do if I cannot receive physical mail here at my address in India? So that depends on you and depends on your state. So for a lot of states, you can request the ballot to be sent to you by email or by fax. So I would say first look at your state requirements, look at how states are sending their ballot, what your options are. So again, fvap.gov/guide, go to your state, and they'll give you a list of options there. And if there isn't an option that works for you, we'd again suggest that you reach out to your local election official and talk about options. So I'm just getting information that all states actually will let you receive your ballot electronically. So that should not be a problem for you. They should be able to send you your ballot electronically. And then over to you, Laura, for our next questions.
Okay, so we just received a question that says, what is the exact form that we have to print out and stick on the envelope? Okay, so I think the question is asking about the template. Says, what are we printing out and sticking on the envelope? Okay, so I'm gonna hold this up. I hope you can see it. It looks kind of like this. It is a template. It is a postage paid template. You can download this and print this from the fvap.gov website. Just search for envelope on the website, and it should bring you up some search results that have the envelope template. So this, once you print this out, it's very easy to use. And again, the great thing about it is postage paid. So if you can get your materials to one of the consulates or the embassy, you don't need to put any postage on this particular envelope. It's already postage paid. Now remember, this envelope needs to go inside an outer envelope, which is what you use to get it to the consulate. But if you are using this template, no need to stick postage on it, okay? However, this template is optional, it's not required. If you want to just write the address of your voting officials on a plain envelope, you're welcome to do so. In that case, you would need to put your own domestic postage for within the United States to get it to your voting officials, okay? However, we really recommend using this template. It's very easy, postage paid. So go to fvap.gov, search for envelope. You'll find this envelope template, which you can print out, fill out with your address and information, fill out your local voting address, and then just glue it or tape it onto any envelope that you have around the house. And that's also what you'll use to get your registration materials to us. So I hope that answers your question. And it looks like we have been so busy answering questions. We're gonna keep trying to take a few more, but we're getting to the end of our program. So Sarah, I'm gonna turn it over to you for a few.
There we go. So again, we only have a few more minutes. So if you have any questions, please ask them now and we'll do our best to get through them. So our next question coming in is, how do I check if I'm registered in my last legal address in the United States? That's a great question. It will depend on the state to see if you're registered to vote there. But even if you're registered to vote, that doesn't mean you're automatically going to receive your absentee ballot. So if you have not filled out the absentee ballot request form this year, you should do that to make sure that you receive your absentee ballot, even if you're already registered. Now check if you're registered. It depends on the state. Some states will have a database where you can check that, some states won't. But like any question particular to a state, you can reach out to your local election official, who you can find contact information at fvap.gov/guide. Let's see. Our next question is, if we are sending the voter registration via email, do we need to send the envelope as a scanned copy? No, you don't. So the envelope exists in order to make sure that you have postage paid in the United States, so you don't have to pay to vote. But you don't need to send that if you you don't need to send that if you're sending your voter registration via email. Sometimes there'll be a cover page you need to send, but there won't be, you don't need to send the envelope. And so again, the 3 consulates that have drop boxes are Chennai, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. So the consulates that do not have drop boxes are Calcutta and New Delhi. So if you live in Calcutta or New Delhi, you will need to physically mail in your ballot to the consulate if you want it dropped off there. Again, you'll need to put the envelope addressed to the United States in another envelope addressed to that correct consulate. Let's see, our next question. If I put my postage page envelope inside another envelope for the Dropbox at the consulate in Mumbai, who do I have to address the outer envelope to? So if you're dropping it off, there's no need for an outer envelope. If you're dropping it off in the Dropbox, like you're physically walking up to the Dropbox, putting the envelope in, you don't need an outer envelope. We know what it's for. We know that it's coming to us to send out, so you don't need the outer envelope. If you are mailing it in, so you're going to mail this envelope into the consulate, we'll post the addresses at the end of this, and we'll post them in the comments as well. But it's essentially to the American Citizen Services at each consulate. Let's see, and now we'll go over to Laura for our remaining questions.
Great. So the question that just came in is, who am I supposed to send the voter registration to if I decide to send it through email? So if you are voting in one of the states that allows you to send in your voter registration information packet by email, there will be very clear instructions when you receive that information about where to send it to. Each state is different. However, when you receive the material, either the registration or the absentee ballot, whatever step of the process you're at, you will be given the email address to which to send it. So make sure you follow those instructions very carefully so that you're sending it to the correct address, okay? And we're just about to wrap up. So if you do have any last minute questions, please send them through. We're just about out of time. It's been a really engaging session with everyone. I'm so glad that we have had so many great questions this evening. And if you still can't find the email address to which to mail your ballot, again, a really great resource for any question is fvap.gov/guide. Find your state on the map, click on that, and there should be information with email addresses for all of the voting officials in each district. And I just want to put in another plug for the video that we showed at the very beginning of this session. If you weren't able to see the video, or it just has a lot of really great information, if you want to go back and reference that video, please do so at any time. You can find that on our YouTube page. I'll ask my colleagues to put the link in the Facebook comments. I believe it's already in there actually, but do go back and reference that. It has a ton of great information about how to go through the process step by step, okay? And right, I think that's the question. Sarah, I'm gonna turn it back to you.
Okay, well, once again, let's see. If I sent my FCPA by email, do I also need to send it in physically? No. One way is fine. You don't need to do both. One way is fine. So on that last question, which luckily was an easy one, I want to say thank you so much for all of your questions and all of your attention. Voting as an American citizen really is one of our fundamental rights. We hope that we've given you the tools to do so as an American citizen living overseas. If you have any remaining questions, please reach out to us. We'll put our email addresses at the end of this. And if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to reach out. We'll do our best to help you walk through them. And again, thank you so much for your time and attention, and we hope you have a great night.